All right, so welcome back, everybody. We have our third week of a 5-week series on bringing creative arts modalities as healing treatments to you. And tonight we have a very special guest. Dr. Ryder is a pioneer in poetry therapy. She's the author of Writing Away the Demons and here to speak to you tonight about her work. So let's welcome Dr. Ryder.
Be here. I first taught poetry therapy here in 1978 to 1983 with Dr. Jack Klein. So I sort of am visiting you again. But I did teach that for a few years as a regular course. And it's always a kick for me to come and share my favorite subject in the world. And that is poetry therapy for transformative writing. I'm also a registered drama therapist, board certified trainer, licensed social worker, but poetry therapy is my passion. So tonight, let's just start very quickly. I'm going to ask you to move around the room. We're going to do a spectrogram, which is going to just put together your stuff for a little bit. And all the people who love the arts will go to that side of the room. People who are not sure how they feel about the arts are here. People who don't care for the arts will be over there. Love it, not sure, not crazy about it. Now we knew that would happen, right?
I'm good there.
Okay, so they're over here. Great. Okay. Here's a tougher question. Those who believe that body, mind, and spirit are separate entities. Yes. Totally separate entities. Yes. Not sure. No.
Got a very cohesive group here.
Those of you who believe that if there is something disruptive or upsetting in either body, mind, or spirit, it will be reflected in the other two aspects. Yes, absolutely. Not sure. No. Now we can do this all night. Because it's a lot of fun, and we can find out who likes real ice cream, who likes chocolate better. But we are in deep waters when we're talking about arts. How many people here believe that creativity is essential for psychological health? Yes, not sure, no. And of course, that's why you're here tonight. So great, okay, come on down, sit down, relax. And I'm going to tell you what we're going to do tonight, what the plan is. My name is easy to remember. I'm Sherry Ryder, but it's R-E-I-T-E-R. And I'm the director of the Creative Writing Center, not W-R, but R-I-G-H-T, meaning to write oneself, meaning to balance oneself. I'm just going to mention this so I don't forget. I have monthly trainings in the city, one Sunday a month for 4 hours for people who want to work towards either incorporating poetry therapy in their work or who are studying to be certified or registered as a poetry therapist. Yes, we do have registered and certified poetry therapists. I have an open house on Sunday, which is from 1 to 4. So if you're interested in that, please take a gold paper before you leave. If you like what we do today and you may be interested in an intensive or in getting information about a 3-day experience, please just check it off, put your name and email, and I'll send you the information. What we're going to do tonight is I have a PowerPoint, and this will help you to have a theoretical base of knowledge. That will take about 20 minutes or so. And then we will have an experiential where you are writing with some literature that I brought with me. You will have the writing for 10 or 15 minutes, then there will be a sharing from those of you who wish to share. You do not have to share, but it's always great when you share. Okay? We're set now. I just have to make sure I know how to work this creature. Okay, so in terms of maybe one of the tech people can just show me, because in truth, I have never used a PowerPoint like this from a hard drive. I'm going to start it. And I always use a mouse, and there are no mice here.
You wanna?
Yeah, but I'll be talking through it. Do I have control over when it goes to the next slide?
Yes, you can.
How do I do that?
Forward and back.
Okay. The poetry prescription for healing and growth. Okay, so when I want to go to the next, just here?
You just said forward.
Okay. Okay. Watching the moon at dawn, solitary, mid-sky, I knew myself completely, no part left out. That's from the 9th century, Izumi Shikibu, who was one of the courtesans in the Japanese court, and they kept diaries very often. And it's just as current today. Again, watching the moon, I would say at midnight. There's 2 versions of this. Watching the moon at midnight, solitary mid-sky, I knew myself completely, no part left out. Izumi Shikibu. In therapy, the client tells his or her life story. And as guides of the therapeutic journey, it is our job to help to identify the problem or problems, examine and explore thoughts, feelings, and relationships, review from other perspectives, and reaffirm the sense of self, will, and purpose. Creativity provides a key for renewal, restoring or restorying, and reclaiming voice. Now, poetic medicine dates back to, first of all, the primitive cultures where we believe that primitive man danced around the fireplace, chanting, enacting the bear being hunted, singing, dancing, everything was, all of the arts were combined. Art, dance, music, drama, and poetry were one. In ancient Egypt, the 4th millennium, that's 4,000 years before Christ, we have the Egyptian shamans who wrote their healing chants on papyrus and then had their patients actually drink down the solution so that the healing could take place from the inside out. The Bible, who's the most famous of poetry therapists, who's also the most famous of music therapists in the Bible? You know the answer to this. David. David is soothing the tortured soul of King Saul with his lyre, his harp, and his psalms, his words, which are still retained even without the music. It's a shame we don't have the original music to what he was actually doing. Then we have, of course, ancient Greece. Apollo was known as the god of healing and the god of poetry. And in Rome, we have the first poetry therapist that we know by name. His name was Soranus. He was also a drama therapist, but in those days, drama and poetry therapy were one and the same because all the plays were written in poetry. And what he did, if the patient was manic, he would prescribe tragedies to be read. And if they were depressed, he would prescribe comedies. Okay, so now I'm going to leap ahead hundreds of years. Okay, the 20th century, we find that it starts to flourish in psychiatry, in library science, in social group work, in the creative arts therapies, education, and other helping professions. Now, I would say that World War I played a key role in this happening because when the soldiers were wounded and then taken to the hospital, there were libraries in the hospital, and the librarians wanted very much to help. So they started to try to find books that would parallel the particular challenge of the person. So if a person had an arm amputated, they would have a book about someone who had gone through a similar thing and how they had overcome it. Carl Menninger, a famous psychiatrist, got very involved with the librarians and worked with them in the 20s and 30s. The creative arts therapies burgeoned later. We're talking in the 60s, time of revolution, sexual revolution, and all other kinds of revolution. Social group work also, every kind of group, encounter group, creative arts therapy group, burgeons in the 60s and 70s. And I put this quote by Freud, "Not I, but the poet discovered the unconscious." So poetry therapy is an umbrella term for the intentional use of the written and spoken word by a trained facilitator for healing and personal growth. It includes poetry and prose, stories and novels, videos and films, cartoons, music with lyrics, anything that starts with a written word. Poetry therapy influences 4 aspects of the self. The spiritual self that connects with nature, with beauty, with the universe, and with the divine. The emotional self, and writing is very helpful for self-regulation of emotion and catharsis. When we write, we contain and release a great deal of emotional energy. The social self, because in a poetry therapy group or with a therapist one-to-one, there is communication and connection. So the person is no longer alone. That's very, very important in any kind of therapy. And the cognitive self, that there's clarity and organization, and writing helps us to do that. The goals of poetry therapy are many goals, but this is a classic list to respond to vivid images and the 5 senses. So right away, if we're talking about vivid imagery and the 5 senses, we're talking about being fully alive. So for any population that is numbed out, that is disoriented, to start to respond to vivid imagery, and I'm thinking geriatric population right away, I'm thinking depressed, extremely depressed people, but all people need that kind of stimulation. And if you're a writer, how many people are writers here? How many people like to write? Okay. Then you know you have to use the 5 senses in your writing. The more you do that, the better you are as a writer. To heighten reality orientation, to better understand yourself and other people, to develop creativity, self-expression, greater self-esteem, to encourage positive thinking, creative problem solving, to strengthen communication, to integrate different aspects of the self, to regulate overpowering emotions and achieve balance, to find new meaning through new ideas, new insights, and information, and to help participants experience the liberating and nourishing qualities of beauty. Beauty is a form of therapy because beauty has a sense of order, which is usually very harmonious and calming to our spirits. I guess I pressed some buttons so that you're only getting one thing. Good, okay. Poetry therapy is a dynamic form. It can be used in one-to-one therapy. It can be used in group therapy, family therapy, and in education and training. Poetry shares the same psychological mechanisms as dreams. This is important. What do you have in dreams? Give me something. Thank you. Imagery. That's the most primitive function that we had. As far as we know, in the development of man's brain, we thought in pictures, even before we spoke, before we had sound. So imagery, condensation, and displacement, which are the three mechanisms we have in dreams, we have in poetry. So every therapist has to be able to speak or understand the language of what I call metaphores. It's a language. That's why the therapist will say, well, tell me about your dream. Tell me about that nightmare. What were the symbols? And then, trying to analyze that and trying to figure out the meaning, which is really based only on what it means to the person. Poetry is large enough to hold paradox and ambivalence. Do I contradict myself? Yes, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. That was Walt Whitman. How does it work? When we look at theories, it comes down to something like this. The facilitator brings in some literature, and there is some identification with the literature. Then it's explored, examined, and there is some kind of a catharsis, sometimes partial, sometimes not at all, sometimes full. And once there's catharsis, if there's a lot of emotion, when we have a lot of emotion, we don't think straight. You can't think straight when you have a lot of emotion. So catharsis gives us a chance to have insight. How writing creates change. Okay. Let's say I bring in a poem that has the symbolism of being trapped. Okay? So the feeling that the person, and if I'm correct, if I have a sense that the person I'm working with feels trapped in their life, okay, and I find a poem that is going to mirror that feeling, I feel trapped, okay, and the poem has these words in it: cage, free, flight, bird. Bird is a loaded symbol, right, of freedom and what else? What is a bird an image of? Give me something. Peace.
Peace, sometimes
Friendship. Freedom.
rising from
Rising out from something that one might feel submerged under. Correct. Okay, so words, particularly image and metaphor, impact the psychic field. That's in red there. A psychic field. It's an energy field. And set feelings and thoughts into motion. Energy is created by the tension of opposites and made greater by words that accurately mirror feelings. So the greater the resonance, the greater the emotional charge. Okay, it's like a battery. If I chose, as a poetry therapist, if I chose accurately, there's going to be a very strong resonance. And when there's a strong resonance, you're going to see something happen, sometimes very quickly. So for example, and I was thinking of Trapped, and I went to Maya Angelou's poem, Trapped. The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But the bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. And it goes on. Any questions on this? Okay, so the facilitator either exports the writing, which means brings the writing out of the client, or imports the writing, which means I'm going to go to Mary Oliver and Rumi and Walt Whitman and Abraham Lincoln and Carl Sandburg and great souled people, and I'm going to bring their writing, which is like a soul transfusion from some of the greatest souled people who have ever lived. So when importing, the facilitator has to be very careful to choose literature that really is pertinent and reflects an issue or theme that's significant. If it's not significant, nothing happens. Okay? So the writing serves as a catalyst for discussion. And I have some examples to make this a little clearer. So we're talking about two kinds of poetry. You know, I talked about importing and exporting. Well, when we bring something in that we think is going to be good, it's like when the doctor writes a prescription, take 2 aspirin and 1 poem, you know. So the prescriptive poem, here's a prescription on anger. Famous poem, Poison Tree. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. Okay, the famous William Blake. And then, of course, we would, if this is targeting, if this has resonance, we're going to see what we call psychologically abreaction. Something's going to happen. The person will start talking about what is really happening to them emotionally, and what their anger really is, and why they're afraid of either not showing it or of showing it. Okay, now we have an example of not prescriptive, but expressive. An expressive example on anger, and yes, I wrote this, and I have no idea what set me off. I know I was in the New York City subways, and someone did something that was so rude, and I really have no recall, so it must have been a traumatic moment for me. How could you do this to me? Treat me like I am nothing. Now I am angry. Very angry. I will erase you. Now you are getting smaller and smaller and smaller until you disappear. I really had written it like this on a piece of paper and stuck it in my pocketbook, found it later and said, you know, this is an example of, you know, really expressive writing. Okay, now, let's look at a prescriptive example on depression, the piece of Wild Things. Again, this is a beautiful poem. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be. I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Wendell Berry. So we might bring in a poem like this, and we might ask the person might not feel this way at all, could feel the opposite, but we might ask them, where is it that you feel most free? Have you ever had that sense of peace? When has that happened for you? Can you bring it into your life now? What would you have to do to bring it into your life now? Expressive example on depression. This is from my book, Writing Away the Demons, Creative Coping Through Transformative Writing. And this was written by Susan Reback, whose husband was who was really leading a very beautiful and wonderful existence with her husband, who was a doctor, and until he was accused of a crime and taken to prison, and she was ostracized by the community, and her dream world kind of collapsed. It's an acrostic, D-A-R-K-N-E-S-S. Darkness goes vertically. And deeper than a casual conversation, a yearning to understand what is real in a world that is not kind. You will find me nearly laughing with the currents of electricity, startling if your eyes have not become dark adapted. So welcome both the darkness and the light. Prescriptive example on fear. This is a very famous poem. It is really not by Guillaume Apollinaire. And the reason it's always attributed to him was that he was having a showing of his artwork, and it was written by Christopher Logue, and I meant to correct that, but I didn't. But and the poster was for this art gallery for Guillaume Apollinaire, and the poem was by Christopher Logue. So you may have heard this poem before. It's a wonderful poem. Come to the edge, he said. They said, we are afraid. Come to the edge, he said. We can't, we will fail. Come to the edge, he said. And they came. He pushed them, and they flew. And this is an example of expressive writing on fear. This is by Linda Lanza, again from my book, Writing Away the Demons. There's like 13 individuals whose stories are told. They tell the story and the writing that got them through some crisis. And so this one is, I fear, this is called inertia. I fear, I think, the discipline. I fight, I think, the restraint. I fight, I think, I fear, I think the fight. I fear the fight. I fight the fear, I think. Yes?
I just want to make sure I understood between the expressive writing and suggestive.
Yes.
If you could clarify that.
Expressive is when the person expresses themselves by writing. Okay, so that's expressive writing, and it comes straight from the person. Prescriptive is when the facilitator or therapist is prescribing a poem and trying to judiciously choose what is going to resonate and what is going to be meaningful for the client. Okay, is that clear? Good, okay, great. A prescriptive example on loss. And actually, I remember reading this, and I had read it before, thought it was a great poem, but when my mother was dying, I came across this poem, and it really spoke to me. And I think I may have the, it's In Blackwater Woods by Mary Oliver. I'm going to not read you the whole poem, but I'm going to read you some parts of it. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. And this was the part that really got me. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this: the fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends upon it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. She is a master, great master of poetry. This is an expressive example also from the book. This one was by an 83-year-old woman who is dealing with life review and the things in her life that she's looking back on. And she has been divorced. She has been alienated from her children. And this was written in the first actual counseling session, the Phoenix of Spring. I hear the crying of my heart. The flood of tears bursts forth. The vessel cracks, needing mending. It is broken like my faith, my dreams, my ideals, my marriage, home, and family. Everything is broken. Only my spirit survives. And really, there's a whole section that goes on there, but it concludes, like the phoenix out of black ash will come the green of life, the yellow of daffodil, the red of rose. Oh heart, there is so much beauty in this spring. I'm just noticing we have a lot of birds coming in. The phoenixes in this one, we had other birds. Literature can also choose, literature really, you have a complete pharmacy for whatever ails you when you have, as a bibliotherapist, files of poetry and short stories on any given topic. One of the most famous poems and one of the most popular and beloved poems throughout the world is Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. And two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler long. I stood and looked down one as far as I could. And everyone gets this image. You can walk into a prison, you can walk into any population. This is such an universal image of two roads diverging. And of course, we've all been in the situation of having to make a decision, and when you make a decision, the universal predicament is that you take one thing, but you give up something else. So there's a very famous case history by Jack Leedy in the book Poetry, Therapy. And it was about a lawyer who became severely depressed and was hospitalized because she became so depressed she couldn't decide what to make for dinner, what to put, which skirt or blouse to put on to go to work. She was really paralyzed. And she was hospitalized and mute, refused to speak to anyone, and they really couldn't help her for a few months. And then luckily her psychiatrist was away on vacation, and they brought somebody else in. And this guy had a hunch that she was trying to make a decision, and whatever that decision was paralyzing her. So what he did was he brought in this poem by Robert Frost, and then she started to talk. And that was the turning point, because really she was trying to decide whether she wanted to divorce her husband or stay. Very clever fellow. And in the end, the poem is not a thing we see. It is rather a light by which we may see, and what we see is life. And that's the PowerPoint. Any questions? Yes.
I raised this question a lot, but I'm still thinking about it. Has there been some research done on this particular field and how it would be standardized for research?
Yes. Of course, we could always use more research. However, in the 1980s, James W. Pennebaker did studies where he asked college students to write 4 days in a row, 15 to 20 minutes each time. And he took blood samples before and after. And the T cells and immunity level rose up. In the group that wrote about a trauma in detail with using the 5 senses. The people who wrote on trivial topics, there was no change. The people who wrote and disclosed and in detail revisited a trauma or something that was deeply disturbing to them had fewer doctor visits for the next 4 months and greater immunity. So that was a landmark scientific, and it's been replicated many, many times. Of course, scientifically, the question is, and we're still trying to answer, who does this benefit? What types of personality, what types of illnesses, and it's not so clear-cut. There's been journaling studies. There's been a few. There's no hard evidence that I know of. And of course, when they do the studies and in the writing cure, which came later, you don't know what form the people wrote in. So when they say they wrote in their journals, it could be poetry, it could be prose. So we don't have that clear-cut information. Yes?
How do you personally feel about the stratification of poetry therapy into bibliotherapy, literary therapy, writing therapy? Do those, it's clear what you wrote, but does it feel like it pulls apart the unity of the profession? Or do you feel like it divides? What do you think? Just curious.
I think if everybody was as flexible as me, it would unify the profession. You know, we have many identity issues in this field, and one of the identity issues is this, compared to the other creative arts therapies. Poetry therapy is probably the most widely practiced art therapy because everyone feels that, the psychiatrist feels he can use a poem, a teacher can bring in a poem. Doesn't mean they're a certified poetry therapist. It's most widely used, but least recognized. And it's diffused because everyone feels they can do it. So that's been a double-edged sword. So we are the orphan child of all the arts therapies, the smallest group, you know, probably 100 to 150 members, maybe 50 poetry therapists in the United States who are mentors. Yeah. So, right.
When I actually participated in an online writing course called Digging Deep, Facing Thyself, and it was like a 4-week writing course involving just women from ages 18 to 26 years old, and it was very transformative for me and for the community of women. Like, we had a Facebook page, and we would share and comment on each other's writing. We had writing partners. I met people from like all over the world, and it was really a way to connect and heal together. Like, realizing that you're not alone, and just being able to get those words and those dark things that nobody wants to speak about or nobody wants to listen to you, but you have other women around the world that are there sharing experiences. So writing is definitely for me like healing.
Definitely. What's your first name?
Carolina.
Carolina is absolutely correct. It's very healing. I also have a program, Poets Behind Bars, which is a long-distance program for maximum security prisoners. And, you know, people buddy up with the prisoners. And anytime, again, you are not alone. This is the worst thing, when people think that they are alone, that only they could possibly have this problem, whatever this problem is. And we really talk ourselves into a corner when we isolate, when we stay alone, because connection is absolutely vital for healing. Yes.
So like last week we were talking about music therapy, and sort of like the trauma is so embedded that it's hard to express with words. Do you ever find it that you have to use other sources of therapy, of creative therapy, or possibly dance or
Absolutely.
music or something before
Absolutely.
you start actually like using?
Yes. In trauma, because a trauma victim has indelible images that have been burned into their brain, the verbal component would not be the first thing that you would do in therapy. You might use a different form, art therapy or music therapy or dance therapy. It would be towards the second half of treatment for a trauma person. As far as I'm concerned, Moreno had the right idea. He had the wrong terminology. Who am I to say that? But okay. When in the 1920s, he said, it's psychomusic, it's psychodance, it's psychodrama, it's psycho-art, it's psychopoetry. Well, the only one and the most important to him was psychodrama. And drama, and I'm a theater major, I was in acting originally, drama, we believe, incorporates everything. Drama is to do. It is to make sounds. It's to make music. It's to dance. It's to be totally alive. So when Moreno, now nobody liked the word psycho, so that didn't stick. It became art therapy, music therapy, dance therapy, drama therapy, but also psychodrama did sustain itself. As far as I'm concerned, it all merges. And the separations that are artificial, I'm a poetry therapist. Well, I'm an expressive writing therapist. Well, I'm a bibliotherapist. Well, I'm a journal therapist. We all do the same thing, basically, which is work with that connection, work with the imagery, work with what the person is trying to express, and try to help them get to the next level of wherever they choose to go in their life. So I sort of feel it's all on the spectrum together. And when I start my sessions, very often I use movement and music. And sometimes I have people drawing in the middle of a poetry therapy session. I don't isolate one from the other. I use a creative arts therapy approach. Yeah. I'm just going to take 2 more, and then we're going to do the writing experience because we want to.
At what point do you bring in the poetry? Because it seems you have to know quite a bit about the person before you could select the right poem to bring in.
So you would have to judge that, and it depends what kind of a setting it is. If it's a writing circle, like it depends where you're working, it's different than an individual therapy. You'd have to first find out. You know, sometimes if you ask the person, do you like poetry? They'll say, oh, I hate it. You know, but that doesn't mean they'll hate a particular thing that you bring in, or maybe they're more amenable to storytelling. And so story is also part of this. And I'll use, and if a person is worried about spelling, for example, or grammar, they may hate the idea of writing. So I might use storytelling or chanting or jazz chants or some other form that is going to, you know, ignite for that person or group of people. So a lot of it is using your judgment, but again, in training, we talk about the techniques and timing and specific literature to bring in. Somebody else had a hand up. Yeah.
A question about the therapeutic techniques and distress tolerance or emotional regulation, both those things. You said you often read a poem that resonates with the person. Do you also use poetry as a way of like regulating their current emotion, maybe an opposite
For sure.
situation?
Absolutely. Now there's something in music called the ISO principle, which Ira Altschula used, and that is where you go in with the same mood. Okay, so I had one diagram where I said, well, sometimes you go in, now if somebody's depressed, I'm not coming in with a limerick. Though some people will say, well, I've used limericks and that seems to work. It's coming from the opposite, right? Oh, I might start with something that is a little sad, but it has to have hope in it. So you have to be very, very careful when you're choosing this material, especially with someone whose mood can swerve down very quickly. Okay, are we ready for a little writing experience? Yeah. Okay. I have some different materials because I wasn't sure. Do you feel like getting deep or staying light? Do you really want to get to know each other very much, or not particularly? Of course, nobody's going to answer me on that, so that's a silly question. Okay. The beauty in this work is that each person really chooses the depth that they want to go to, whether they choose to disclose or they do not choose to disclose. We're going with Mary Oliver's beautiful poem, The Swan. I'm going to give you these to pass down. Okay.
Thank you.
The Swan. Does everybody have it? Everybody has? Yeah. Okay. Did you too see it drifting all night on the Black River? Did you see it in the morning rising into the silvery air, an armful of white blossoms, a perfect commotion of silk and linen as it leaned into the bondage of its wings, a snowbank, a bank of lilies, biting the air with its black beak? Did you hear it? Fluting and whistling a shrill, dark music, like the rain pelting the trees, like a waterfall knifing down the black ledges. And did you see it? finally, just under the clouds, a white cross streaming across the sky, its feet like black leaves, its wings like the stretching light of the river. And did you feel it in your heart? How it pertained to everything. And have you too finally figured out what beauty is for? And have you changed your life? Okay. I'm going to give you the assignment, and the exercise, and I'm going to ask you to read it again for yourselves. I'm also going to mention that there's a wonderful quote by Hortense Kalischer. One must give back the stare of the universe. Okay, we are taking in all the time. We are pummeled by images, by sounds, by sights, by different things happening. And there's a recorder in there, and it's taking it all in, even when we don't even realize it's taking it in. So when we write, we are slowing down, we're stopping. And I'm going to ask you to ask yourself these questions. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you notice? And if you want to ask a question at the end, like Mary Oliver does, you can, or you can create something else. And stay for a moment in silence until maybe a conversation will come back to you, a smell may come back to you, a moment. You can write about that. Okay? And we're going to take 10 minutes for this. There is an electrical energy that is not broken when we're sitting in a circle. And everybody is equally important. That's why I'm going to sit down. Everybody is equally important, and everybody can see each other and be seen. It is also the recapitulation, Alvin calls it, of the family in counseling. We're sitting around the table. Okay, so we're going to make room for you to come in to our circle. And again, I ask people to be spontaneous here and allow whatever came up for you to come up. And I found myself thinking about my visit to the gynecologist today. I didn't expect that to happen. But whoever feels like sharing, let's do that. If you don't want to share, don't feel pressured in any way. There are different ways of knowing. Sometimes we learn what we know by what we write. So if we're in the process of connecting first with ourselves in our writing, we might not be ready to share with somebody else. Or we may feel this is private, and that is always respected. Would anybody like to share?
Are we sharing just a general thought about the poem, or any specific lines, or what are you looking for?
I want the whole thing, baby. I want the whole thing. Unless you feel you'd rather just go with a portion of it, that's fine too. Whatever you feel like sharing.
Okay. Can I read what I wrote?
Yes, please, before you read, say your name.
Harriet.
Harriet?
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
I saw a family of swans in the Central Park Lake. Mom and her little ones, beautiful as they glided along the lake. lined up, mom and 3 or 4 little ones. I heard silence because they did not make any sound as they glided. I noticed myself mesmerized by the grace and beauty. Then I remembered how the swan in Central Park held a duckling, how horrified I felt when I heard about it. What is beauty for? To fool you, to calm you. My life changed a bit with reinforcement of the realization that things, even beautiful things, cannot always be trusted to be what they are at first glance.
All right, you surprised me there.
Good.
Yeah. And wonder and surprise is one of the great things about writing, because we start out all with pretty scene, the swans and the little babies. It's so cute, it's so sweet, and then at the end, you say, well, can I even trust the beautiful things?
Mm-hmm.
And do they last? And does anything last? Well, that's a different story.
Right.
But great.
Thank you.
Great. And
Dichotomy, a sense of beauty but transfused with fear or ugliness, black and white. Extension, continuity, it will always be there, but it's not always noticed. Beauty is for shaking up the monotony, giving something to hope for. Is it easy to find but hard to see? I hear rustling, gliding, whistling, subtle sounds. But how do you bite the air? And do you only see what is defined for you?
you only see what is defined for you.
Because the title says the swan, I just wonder if it didn't have that title. I mean, there's definitely a lot of swan-like. When you read it, you're like, okay, that's a swan, but I wonder if there were a title if anyone would see something.
And can you read the last thing that you wrote, the last line? And
do you only see what is defined for you? Because I was wondering, like, if this title hadn't been defined for me, what the poem was about hadn't been defined for me, what would I have seen? Sort of.
And is it possible that you might be expressing something beyond the poem?
Definitely.
Is it really just what's defined for us? Am I supposed to do this and this and this? Is that it's all defined? It's all ready road for me? Or do I feel the question is good job. That's great. Again, when I say good, I'm not praising the writing. I'm praising your ability to encounter yourself. Okay, this is not about an aesthetic process. It's about an engagement. What John Hopkins called inscape, which is the opposite of escape, just where you try to get close to encounter in the world and examine it, and it's a difficult thing to do. It's a great term, inscape, rather than escape.
Samantha. This reminds me of my lake house in Pennsylvania, particularly the waterfalls just a few minutes away. Whenever I go to PA, I can completely relax. It's like going on a mini vacation. My cabin is 3 floors, newly renovated, so the upstairs is new, but it still has that rustic cabin feel. Our house is on a private lake, and my favorite thing to do is kayak and to sit outside in the chilly morning air with a sweatshirt and my coffee and just be. All I can hear is the wind and the wind chimes while looking out at a serene lake with lots of green trees. It's amazing how being in nature can alter your mindset if you just take the time to breathe. The falls especially are absolutely beautiful and are deep in the woods. There are pathways to hike on. If you think about it, it's such an overwhelming aspect, like the falls is scary. One small step and you could slip. And just seeing the big drop in the spray of the water reminds me of this poem, peaceful yet with a dark side. Things that are larger than us and what we do not understand can be frightening. Everything can have a light and dark side.
Everything can have a light and a dark side. So again, we're moving along very peacefully. It sounds like everything, oh, isn't she lucky she gets to sit with her coffee and her sweatshirt. out there. I wish I was there with you, you know, kayaking, look at the water, this is great. And then you just bring in a little bit of the dark there, you know, the slot, you said the falls could be scary. There could be some danger lurking. There's dark and there's light. Good.
I don't know, I just thought the poem, even though I thought the poem was really pretty, there was just like a lot of like black in it. So as much as I was like picturing whatever I was picturing, like all pretty, it was like on the Black River and just had like, not like negative connotations, but just like a lot of dark images that kind of was like counterbalancing the light. So just like I guess everything in life can be like positive and negative.
Right. And some people do not allow themselves to look at the dark or stay in the dark. Some people are too afraid to do that, though the truth is that great creativity incubates and sometimes needs darkness to incubate in. But we will always see in poetry dark and light and the juxtaposition.
I'm John.
Yes.
And I found myself wanting that initial experience that you were describing, and I wrote a final comment that it felt like I felt with each line deprived of the experience of beauty that I so wanted to have from this poem. I found each line dark and wrote...
The Swan by Mary Alvin?
Yeah, this one. And I'm reading it, and I wanted to see beauty. I love nature. I don't think I'm a depressed person, but I think after you hear this, you're going to think I'm just kind of drink. No, the first line I responded, I think it's a terrifying image. Like I thought of scary things. And the second line, it felt cold to me. An armful of white blossoms, I conjured up death.
Okay, so
yeah,
you're right. There is stuff here. You have a Black River, you have a commotion, you have bondage, you have biting, you have certain words in here.
Yeah.
So it depends again what we saw, what we felt, individually how you reacted to that, whether you protected yourself from it, whether you said, okay, you said sort of, okay, you went to the beauty first, and then you said, well, you know, there is this other side too, even in nature.
So I've written poetry for a long time and taken many classes, so like the analytical side came in first, just like analyzing poetry, and I've, the same thing, like,
What's your name?
Anna. For me, I saw a lot of like words like endlessness. In the beginning, I saw a lot of, not necessarily like positive or negative, it was really kind of just it was like the immortality of the soul, everything is connected, the universal, I kind of saw the swan as like there was this thing out there that was flying around, and then it was your choice to change, your choice to take it in and to make it inward and to make it kind of your own being. But then I started reading it again, and like the bondage of the wings was something that was like really interesting to me, that it was leaning against the bondage, which was strange to me. So, because there's this idea of like a bird in flight is like completely free, but to think of wings as bondage was a really interesting image to me.
Okay, so now let's stop for a minute.
Sure.
What are we doing now? What is the process here? Anybody? Is she talking about herself or is she talking about the poem? She's talking about the poem, which is exactly what you would do in a poetry class, which is exactly what in therapy we do not do, because the focus is on your life, not on whoever wrote this and whatever she thought. And this is not meant as a criticism of you. This is just a good opportunity to have a, rather than bringing your analyst, your aesthetic analyst out. I would love to hear what you wrote, if you feel like.
Well, that was.
Or you were writing the analysis.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like everything that I was saying is like a lot of the stuff that's things that I'm dealing with now, like about accepting change, accepting like not being resistant to things. But I wasn't necessarily, there wasn't like a specific.
But you were intellectually following your intellect here and in the
Yeah, but I feel like I was also being kind of open with myself, I guess, and just thinking about
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Ellen. That's good.
I just wanted, I was an English major as an undergraduate, and I actually started doing exactly that at first.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, you really have to like leave this behind. And only when I did that was able to make sense of what it was that drew me to that on an intellectual level, because I found myself underlining all the negative images, and they really annoyed me, like they weren't supposed to be there. So I ended up writing after that. I said, okay, well then get out of the head and leave the English major behind. Because at first I was looking at it and saying, oh, that's contradictory.
And it's
imagine a paper.
It's hard for English majors and poets to not go to the analytical ear, but that's the distinction.
Yeah.
Just like I've had actors who will say to me, I'll do any form of therapy, but I don't want to do psychodrama. It's too close to my profession. Like it's too close to what I do as an art, and I want to keep that separate. But it's a completely different track.
I was able to actually eventually switch it.
Yeah, couldn't it, like, I feel like couldn't it start as like a jumping off board? Because I feel like if you immediately start to like talk about yourself, people might really resist that. So
that's exactly
if
why
you start talking about what the poem means to you, then you can be like, well, you know.
That's exactly it.
Why do those images come up for you? Even
That's
if it's
the beauty. That's the beauty. That you're not saying, what's your problem? Talk to me. It's an indirect. When you're talking about the poem, we both can talk about the poem. So you can do it any way that, any way that is going to work to eventually get to that place. Would you be so kind?
I would be glad to. So I underlined the words and then I wrote, I want to edit it out. I always edit it out for my kids. My mother always edited it out for me. Does editing it out vanquish it or simply hide it from view? Isn't it still there even if you cover it up? Can you ever really, really delete it if it is true?
Love that. Can you ever really delete it if it's true? You can edit it, you can cover it up, you can let the truth. It's a great voice. Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, name?
Mark. The poem, it left me feeling cold, like she was alone and didn't think, did anybody see this? She was alone in the experience. So cool, cold ice, and then soft, slushy snow, wet weathered wings, a breath, a breeze, am I really free? I sell who? I sell what? I sell late, late into the evening. Quiet, close, and dark. I isolate.
There was a question here. Did you say the question?
Am I really free? The last.
Am I really free? That in itself is a technique. When you ask a person to go back to a line that you feel might be significant. So, that's a highly loaded question, and that's a great question for each of us. Am I really free? I love it also when you I sell who, I sell what, I sell late, I sell late. Yeah. And how each person comes up with their own question.
don't know what this means. I just don't know what's good for a while. So I felt the same that you said, like loneliness and like experiencing good and bad at the same time. Like it's just how you perceive it. So here goes. Are you here with me tonight, hearing the breath between our sight, rising from within a place I could not name, that I tell myself not to go there again? Your kisses drenching me, humidifying my soul with rain. I felt the pain of your loneliness when you held me close and would not let go of me. Why did you kiss me with such intensity if you would just then leave me with no remedy? To mend my heart from all this catastrophe, I see you fighting, living in two worlds, in which in one you were brought to honor and respect women, but in the other you are told to treat women as objects. Polarity of the same thing, love and hate, pleasure and pain, and that's it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Would you like to hear what other people thought about that? Not that we're supposed to interpret necessarily what you think you heard, or what it brought up in you, so that you can make an I statement. I heard, I felt in response. Emma?
I don't know. I really liked it. I just want to say that. It just felt familiar, and for some reason, I don't know if I'm the only one who felt that it was familiar, and I couldn't even say why. It's not even like because I'm not really sure, what you were talking about either. It's probably different for everyone, but it just it felt the whole feeling, what you were describing, just felt familiar.
Well, can you name the feeling that you felt?
Like confusion. It was like, why do you do this if you're just going to do that?
Right.
Confusion, just like there was sadness, but because there was the back and forth, so.
Yeah, I felt like the sadness and frustration and like needing a remedy after being kissed, which is like, after being kissed, you should feel like elated and amazing and like connected to this person, but instead you need like medicine like from this person, which is really interesting.
Well, can you tell me the lines that go along with what she's saying about the remedy? What Emma's saying?
I said, so your kisses drenching me, humidifying my soul with rain. I felt the pain of your loneliness when you held me close and would not let go of me. Why did you kiss me with such intensity if you would then just leave me with no remedy? To mend my heart from all this catastrophe, I see,
Yeah.
I felt also a familiarity and sadness and loneliness and pain, but I also felt a strength in you for asking all those questions and kind of not digging into it. And I like that.
Yes, and again, the dichotomy. On the one hand, you can see he was taught to respect women, but he also can treat them as objects. Hey, what's that all about? Well, rather than hold all that confusion inside, yes, I agree with you. It's strengthening to put it on paper and then look at it with your observing ego. You look at it and you say, hey, I named it. I named this confusion. I named the dichotomy. And again, poetry is big enough where you could say it can hold all that stuff. John, would you like to share anything from yours?
Oh, I did. I started with that and then stopped. But it was just a continuation of having a response to each one. I felt it parallel to a lot of others that the whole emotional sort of then felt in continuation with the death theme. It seemed like reminding me of dark Victorian burial and the snowbank and the bondage felt like a tomb. But everything about that, so I didn't want it. I was angry that this was what I was getting, so I wanted to get beauty out of it. And it just, so yeah.
It's so interesting now. I'll tell you when I last used this poem. I used it for the training of med students in ghetto area in New Jersey, UMDNJ. And they see a lot of death, and they see a lot of, and they have to just keep working and working and working. And so to get the med students in touch, to slow down, to process some of the things that they had seen, this was really a great poem. What I was interested in, of course, what did you see, what did you hear, what did you experience? But I didn't pay as much attention to the darkness, which was absolutely perfect for the med students, because they're treating kids who have bullet wounds from a passing car, right? But in this group, and if I've made you angry with me, I apologize.
No. I work in medical, and I think that I'm this line about biting the area.
But you're right, there's a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah, but I think it's contextual. Like I bring that to this class because I just worked the whole day in a hospital. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's, and for someone else, it's a different experience. So how do you, I want to ask you, how do you, when you bring this into a classroom, because I think it's really hard as a music therapist, I'm always have to be on guard that I'm not moving into projective territory, because it can happen. So this, you know.
Right. So, you know, again, I can see from the reaction of this group, and every group is different, of course, and you can use the same poem 20 different times, and then one time you might get a reaction that is not so positive. I think we have to always be careful. Now, the other two things that I brought in, which I did not use, would have been totally neutral and have no, there's not stuff to project to. It's all from you. One was a fill-in where you would have had to just, with very little work involved, you have to fill in. The template is already there from the original poem. And the other is where I'm from, which I've done for the new school before, of where, you know, each of you would be making a list of your favorite food, your favorite drink growing up, your pet, your favorite toy, your favorite piece of furniture, your favorite sweater, whatever, and creating poems about your childhood. Now, of course, childhood, not everybody had a happy childhood, so you can run into a problem there too. But yes, there's a little bit of risk involved, especially in a one-time event like this where you don't really know me. So why should you trust that or read what you've written? And you don't really know each other yet because this is only the third time, right? So that you know that in terms of a group, in terms of group phases of the group, you're in the warming up phase, okay? And I took something that really jumps beyond the warm up phase here. So I'll have to think about this and process, well, was this the best choice, you know? I can't be sure, but I personally think that the writing that you did, from what I heard, was wonderful. I think that you found the questions that you needed to find, and that may be valuable questions. So, you know, I feel good about it personally. I feel, I hope everybody walks out tonight feeling, well, you know, that was good.
I think it's great to be provocative, and that's what this class is about, is to provoke responses about moving on. So I think it was a great choice. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to close.
We have to
Close. How do you want to close your part of this?
Well, you said you're going on for another 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just do a quickie, okay? Which I sometimes close with. Let's everybody stand up. And with this, the writing is not always about getting an answer. It's really about finding the questions and being able to articulate them, which I thought was really beautifully done by the group tonight. So let's, like the spokes of a wheel, I'm going to ask, I would like each person to put their hand in the middle of the center, one at a time, as you ask a question that came up for you tonight. Whether it's a personal question like came out in the poem, or whether it's about poetry, therapy, or transformative writing, or anything. Just any kind of question.
For you.
For you.
For me.
For you.
Yes.
Like, I'll start off, okay?
Sorry.
How can I put more beauty into my life? Okay. So anybody now just will ask another question and put your hand up on top of mine until we're all going to be joined together.
I create my own struggles.
Why not move forward?
How can I trust that something is beautiful?
How can I focus more on the positive and less on the negative?
How can I let myself write poetry and not judge myself for it?
Can I help anybody unless I'm wearing a neutral mask?
How can I lose the fear of beauty?
How come this poem made me feel happy?
How can I find more time?
How can expression heal?
And the last, how can I find the right way? How can I find a right way to live in my life?
All the energy that we've